Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
No, sir, I didn't think it polite to listen.
I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't care if the music's played accurately, so long as it is played with expression. As far as music is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I leave science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracken?
Yes, sir.
By the way, Lane, I see from your book that on last Thursday night, when Lord Trorman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir, 8 bottles in a pint.
Why is it, sir, that at a bachelor's establishment the servants invariably drink the champagne?
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I find that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good grief. Is married life so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I've had very little experience of it up to myself, up to the present. I've been married only once, and that was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I'm much interested in your private life, Lane.
No, sir, it is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I am sure. Thank you, Lane, that will do.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on matrimony seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, I don't see what the use is of them. They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Earnest Worthing.
Ah, Ernest, how are you? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I say, Algy.
Well, I suppose it is customary in polite society to have some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock, of course. What brings you up to town?
Why did you ask that, my dear friend?
What I meant was, where have you been since you were in town last?
I've been in the country.
What on earth do you do there?
Well, you see, when one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
Who are those people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours, neighbours.
Got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire?
How perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How terribly you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Eh, what? Shropshire? Well, yes, of course. Hello. Why the cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who's coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolyn.
Oh, perfectly splendid.
Yes, my dear fellow, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
That's why.
Dear boy, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. It's almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolyn. As a matter of fact, I have come to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you said you'd come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic about proposing. It's all very romantic to be in love. But I see nothing romantic about a definite proposal. One might be accepted, usually is, I believe. Then all the fun is over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If I ever get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt of that, dear Archie. In fact, I believe the divorce court was specially designed for those whose memories are so curiously constituted.
There is no use speculating on the subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. Cucumber sandwiches are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
But you have been eating them this whole time.
That's a different matter entirely. She's my aunt. Bread and butter. Bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is too.
Yes, well, you need not eat it as if you're going to eat it all. You act as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her, and I don't believe you ever will be.
Well, Beth, you say that.
Dear boy, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
No, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. Accounts of the extraordinary number of bachelors that you see all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear boy, Gwendolyn is my first cousin, and before I allow you to form an alliance with her, we'll have to clear up this whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? I don't know anyone of that name.
Bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room last time, dear.
Yes, sir.
You did tell me you've had my cigarette case this whole time. I wish to goodness you could have told me. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Yes, well, I wish you would offer one. I'm going to be more than usually hard up at the moment.
There's no good offering a large reward now that the thing is found, is there?
That is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, now that I look at the inscription inside, I find the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times. Besides, you have no right to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
It's perfectly absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
Yes, I am quite aware of the fact, and I don't intend to discuss modern culture with you. It is not the sort of thing one should talk of in private. Just give me back my cigarette case.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This is a present from someone with the name of Cecily. And you just said you don't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you must know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady, she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Give it back to me, Algy.
Yes, but if she's your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells, why does she call herself Little Cecily? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love.
My dear friend, what is there in that? Some aunts are small, some aunts are not small. Surely that is a matter an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt, and that is perfectly absurd. Now, for heaven's sake, give me back my cigarette case.
Yes, but why does she call you her uncle if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily, with her fondest love, to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no problem, I admit, with an aunt being a small aunt. But why any aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle is quite beyond. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answered the name of Ernest. Why, you look as if your name was Ernest. You're the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. It's perfectly absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. Here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4 the Albany W. I'll keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if you ever attempt to deny it to me, to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, if you must know, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does still not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy, you had best have the thing out at once.
My dear Archie, you sound exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Which is exactly what dentists always do. am certain of it.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you explain to me why you are Earnest in town and Jack in the country.
Give me back my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now produce your explanation, and pray, make it improbable.
My dear friend, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it is perfectly ordinary. For you see, old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a small boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle out of motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the tutelage of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I can tell you candidly the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have Bunburyed all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now, go on. Why are you Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear friend, I don't know that you would be able to understand my real motives at all. For you see, when one is made a guardian, one must adopt a high moral tone on all subjects. And as a high moral tone is not conducive to either one's health or one's happiness, I found it necessary to invent a younger brother by the name of Earnest, that I might jot up to town as often as I like in order to get him out of the serious scrapes he gets himself into. That, dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That would not be at all a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Don't try it. You had much better leave it to the people who haven't been at university. They do it so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in calling you a Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
Well, you have invented a very useful younger brother called Earnest, in order that you may come up to town as often as you please. I have invented a perfectly invaluable old invalid friend called Bunbury, in order that I may go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. Why, if it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's, for I've really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
But I haven't invited you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. So absurdly careless of you. Nothing offends people so much as not receiving invitations.
You'd much better dine with Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the slightest notion of doing anything of the kind. In the first place, I dine with her on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I am always treated as a member of the family and sat down with either no woman at all, or 2. And in the third place, I know exactly whom she will sit me next to this evening. She will place me next to Mary Pickford, who always flirts with her husband across the table. It is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent. And that sort of thing is very much on the rise nowadays. The number of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now I know you to be a Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm certainly not a Bunburyist. Excuse me. I'm not a Bunburyist. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I intend to kill my brother Ernest. In fact, I think I'll kill him in any case. For you see, Cecily's a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. I would advise you to do the same with your your invalid friend with the ridiculous name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you will do very well to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very hard time of it.
If I ever marry a sweet, charming girl like Gwendolyn, and she is the only girl I've ever met that I would want to marry, I shall certainly not want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize, my dear fellow, that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
My dear young friend, that is exactly the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propagating for the past 50 years.
Yes, and the happy English home has proved in half the time.
Oh, don't be cynical. It is perfectly easy to be cynical.
It isn't easy at all to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about... Oh. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives, creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, I can get her out of the way for 10 minutes in order that I might have a chance. So you can propose to Gwendolyn, of course. We dine with you tonight, Ulysses?
Suppose so, if you want to.
But you must be serious. I hate people who are not serious about dining. So shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, Algernon. I hope you're behaving well.
I'm feeling quite well, Aunt Augusta.
It's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not that. It would leave no room for development, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry for a little late, Algernon. I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I haven't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looked quite 20 years younger. Now have a nice cup of tea and one of those cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta. Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them especially.
There were no cucumbers on the market today, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir, not even for ready money.
Thank you, Lane, that will do. Greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
Oh, it really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
Hold this, Algernon.
It's quite.
It certainly has changed its colour. From what cause, I simply cannot say. I have quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with dear Mary Pickford. She's such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I'll have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight.
I hope not, Algernon. You'll put my table completely out, and your uncle will have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he's accustomed to that.
Yes, well, it is a great nuisance, and I need hardly say terrible disappointment. But I've just had a telegram from my dear friend Bunbury. He seems to be doing poorly. They think I should be with him.
Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Oh, yes. Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, Algernon, I think it's high time that this Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. The whole, sympathy with invalids is completely morbid. Illness is not something to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. Always trying to tell this to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice as far as any cure on his ailment goes. But I fear you must tell Bunbury not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It's my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has said practically everything they're going to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
Yes, well, I'll speak to Bunbury on the subject if he's conscious. But I think I can assure you that he'll be all right by Saturday. Music, of course, is a great difficulty. One plays good music, people won't listen. And if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But if you'll come into the next room, I'll run over the program I've established.
Thank you, Algernon. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. I simply cannot abide French songs, but I think German is a fairly respectable language. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me?
Certainly, Mamma.
Yes, but...
A charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel that they mean something quite different, and that makes me so nervous.
Ah, but I do mean something different.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a curious way of coming back into her room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Gwendolyn, I feel it's only right to tell you that ever since I met you, I have adorned you more than any girl I've ever met since I met you.
Yes, I am quite aware of the fact. And in public, at any rate, I wish that you had often been more demonstrative. We live in an age of ideals, Mr. Worthing. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more popular monthly magazines and has reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment that Algernon mentioned to me that he had a brother called Earnest, I knew that I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn.
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But do you mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest?
Oh, but your name is Ernest.
Well, yes, I know. But supposing it was something different, could you still love me then?
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the real facts of life as we know them.
Well, honestly, darling, I don't know that the name of Ernest much suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Still, I think there are plenty of other perfectly good names. I think Jack, for instance, a very charming name.
Jack?
Yes.
Oh, there's very little music in the name Jack. If any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It has absolutely no vibrations. I've known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, have been more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. No, the only safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened. We must be married at once. There is no time to waste.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, yes. I've just told you that I love you, and you have made it not quite unclear that you are not indifferent to me.
I adore you, but nothing has been said at all about marriage. You haven't proposed to me yet. The subject has not even been touched upon.
May I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, I only think it is quite right for me to tell you openly and frankly beforehand that I am determined to accept.
Gwendolyn?
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
True. Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Oh, of course I will, darling. How long you've been about it. I'm afraid you've had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one, you are the only girl I've ever loved.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. Oh, what wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite blue. I hope that you will always look at me just like that when we are married, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir, from that semi-recumbent posture. It's most indignant.
I must beg you to retire. This is not the place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing is not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Nothing of the kind. When you do become engaged, either I or your father should, as health permit, and will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come upon a young girl as a surprise, whether pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be. Now, I have some few questions to put to Mr. Worthing here. While I'm making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
Gwendolyn, the carriage. Carriage now, Gwendolyn.
Yes, Mamma.
You may have a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I have to admit, Mr. Worthing, that you're not down on my list of eligible young men. However, I do have the same list as the Duchess of Bolton. We work together. However, I'm more than willing to enter your name, should your answers be what a truly affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I do.
I am glad to hear it. Managed to always have an occupation of some kind. Yeah, there are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I've always been of the opinion that a man who desires to be married should either know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
Excellent. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate flower. You touch it and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is completely absurd. Fortunately, in England at any rate, it seems to produce no effect whatsoever. Whereas there might be riots and groves in the square and provide a serious danger to the upper classes. Oh, next question. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's life and those exacted on one after one's death, land has ceased to either be a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position, but prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
Well, I do own a house in the country, of course, with some land attached to it. About 1,500 acres, I believe, but I don't depend on it for my income. As far as I can tell, the poachers are the only ones who make anything of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? That can all be cleared up later. You do have a house in the town, I hope. Gwendolyn, as girls, a simple, unspoiled nature such as Gwendolyn can hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I do own a townhouse in Belgrave Square. It is leased by the year to Lady Bloxham, though I may retrieve it at 6 months' notice whenever I like.
Lady Bloxham, I don't know her.
She goes about very little. She is a lady considerably advanced in years.
In our eyes, it's hardly a sign of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
Oh, the unfashionable side. I knew there must be something. However, that can be easily altered.
The fashion or the sign?
Both, if necessary. What are your politics?
I'm afraid I really have none. I'm a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. They come around in the evening. Well, now to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I'm afraid I've lost both my parents.
Mr. Worthing, to lose one parent may be viewed as misfortune. To lose two looks like carelessness. What, your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born of what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of aristocracy?
I'm afraid I don't really know. You see, I had said, Lady Bracknell, that I had lost both my parents. It would be more accurate to say that they seem to have lost me. Well, you see, I was found.
Found.
Yes. The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of very kindly and charitable disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing, because he had a first-class ticket for Worthing at the time. Worthing is a seaside resort in Sussex.
And where did this charitable gentleman with the first-class ticket to the seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
Handbag.
Yes, Lady Bracknell, a somewhat large, black leather handbag with handles on it. A very ordinary handbag, really.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew find this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given him a mistake for his own.
Cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line, to be exact.
The line is immaterial, Mr. Worthing. I must admit to being a bit perplexed by what you just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag seems to me to show a complete disrespect for the ordinary decencies of family life. This reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution, and I assume you know what that movement led to. And as for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom could be used to hide a social indiscretion. And indeed, it's probably been used so far in the past. However, it does not give one an assured basis for a recognized position in good society.
And what would you advise me to do, Lady Bracknell? You'd hardly say that I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
Strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations before the season is quite over, and make a definite effort to produce at least one parent of either sex.
I don't quite see how I could do that, Lady Bracknell.
I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in a storeroom at my home. I think that should satisfy you.
Me? What has this to do with me? Do you think that I, Lord Bracknell, would allow our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to be married into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel?
Good morning. Don't play that ghastly tune, Algy. How idiotic you are.
The girl's all right, old boy. Don't mean to say she refused you. Notice the way she has. She is always refusing people. It is most unkind of her.
Gwendolyn is right as a trivet, I'm happy to say. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged already. Her mother is an entirely different matter. She's quite a gorgon. I don't quite know what a gorgon is like, but I am certain Lady Bracknell is one. She's entirely a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. I'm sorry, dear boy, I shouldn't use your relations so in front of you.
My dear fellow, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't the slightest idea of how to live, nor the remotest instinct about when to die.
Oh, this is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue the matter. You always want to argue about things.
That is exactly what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't suppose there's any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in 150 years or so, do you, Archie?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his.
That's clever.
It is perfectly phrased, and quite as true as any observation in modern life should be.
I'm sick to death of cleverness, Archie. Everywhere one goes nowadays, one meets clever people. I wish to goodness we had a few honest fools left.
We have.
Oh, really? How we should like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course.
What perfect fools.
By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn the truth about your being Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
Truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl like Gwendolyn. Besides, I intend to be rid of Earnest rather soon.
Well, I think that's rather... Do you think that's proper behaviour to a woman?
I don't know. What ideas do you have about the ways to behave to women if you think I'm doing so badly?
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and to someone else if she is plain.
That is perfect nonsense.
And so what about your brother, then? Profligate Earnest?
Yes, well, by the end of the week, as I said, I intend to be rid of him. I'll say he died abroad, in Paris perhaps, and of apoplexy? A lot of people die of apoplexy rather suddenly, don't they?
Yes, my dear fellow, but it's hereditary. The sort of thing that runs in families. You'd much better say severe chill.
You're sure severe chill isn't hereditary?
Of course it isn't.
Well, alright then. My dear brother Earnest, carried off quite suddenly by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
I thought you said that Miss Cardew was somewhat too interested in Earnest. Won't you feel his loss a good deal?
I'm quite pleased to say that Cecily is not a silly romantic girl. She has a capital appetite, takes long walks, and pays absolutely no attention to her studies.
I should rather like to meet Cecily.
Oh, I shall take great care you never do. She's excessively pretty and only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
One doesn't just blurt that sort of thing out to people. Besides, Gwendolyn and Cecily are sure to become fast friends. In fact, I'll bet you anything you like that half an hour after meeting each other, they should be calling each other sister.
Women only do that after they have called each other a lot of other things, but... We really must go up and change if we want a good table at Willis's. You know, it's nearly 7.
It is always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
Well, what will we do after dinner? Go to the theatre?
No, I hate listening.
Well, we might go to the club then.
No, I loathe talking.
Shall we go to the Empire at 10 then?
No, I hate looking at things. It is all so silly.
Well, what shall we do?
Nothing.
It's very hard work doing nothing. However, I don't mind hard work where there's no indefinite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this sort of thing at all.
Algy, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. I do not think that you are quite old enough to do that.
Oh, my serious one.
Ernest, I fear we may never be married. From the expression on Ma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents pay any attention to what their children have to say to them nowadays. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I held over Mama, I lost at the age of 3. But although we may never be man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing she can do will possibly ever alter my eternal devotion to you. The story of your romantic origins, as related to me by Mama with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deepest fibers of my nature. Your Christian name holds an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor, Walden, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily. Algy, you may turn around now.
Thanks, I've done so already.
And you may ring the bell.
You let me see you to your carriage, my own one.
Of course.
I would see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir. Tomorrow, Elaine, I'm going bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I should probably not be back till Monday. You can put up the Bunbury suits and smoking jacket and all that sort of thing.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Elaine.
It never is, sir.
Elaine? Perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction.
There's a sensible girl. The only girl I've ever cared for in my whole life. What are you laughing at, Algy?
Oh, I'm just a little concerned about poor Bunbury, that's all.
I warn you, my friend, you'd best be careful about Bunbury. He's liable to get you into some serious scrapes someday.
I love scripts. They are the only things that are never serious.
That is nonsense. You never speak anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
And that is the end of Act 1. We'll now have a X amount of minute intermission. So you can stay in here and watch him shave. You can go read the letters, or you can just go out and sit in the chairs outside and enjoy the nice Santa Barbara weather. So see you in X minutes.